It's unbelievable. It's right here. Yeah, it won't stop.
Yeah. I need just keep trying again.
Morning.
Hi,
Hello.
did anybody besides me have trouble getting in?
No,
Okay,
I did not.
fine.
Oh, hi Angus, Dave.
Morning. Hello.
Morning. So we are waiting for Joan. And I know she's coming, so let's wait a minute more.
Well,
Who is Joyce?
Pardon?
Who's Joyce Berardis?
Joyce is my assistant.
Oh, okay.
She's the most important person in town hall in Deep River.
She is pretty much driving Deep River right now. So
Good to know.
I'm betting
that's
she,
why I asked Joe to put her on the emails, because my calendar, I can't keep up with it myself.
she
Okay.
makes sure you're where you're supposed to be, huh?
Yeah.
Joe, did you hear from Joan? Joe is muted.
No, I have not. As far as I know, she's coming.
Yep, as far as I know too.
Okay.
Okay. It is 11:34. We'll call the meeting to order. Roll call, we have Angus McDonald.
Yep.
Leslie Strauss is here. Joan Gay is working her way in. Dave Lee is with us, and Joe Comerford. The meeting of the Estuary MOA Committee meeting. The first item for discussion is the revision of the MOA elements. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on this. Dave took a first cut at those revisions. It needs more work. And what my goal would be is, Dave and Joe, for us to have a version that both committees feel accurately reflects the different or the changes that we wanted made, so that that could be one of the main elements of our 12/18 meeting, is to finalize those so that then you can begin some drafting work. But I did want to ask, just in general, if anyone, as a result of the meeting that we had on Friday, had anything that they were uncomfortable with or wanted to discuss privately in our setting. So I'll just open it up to any kind of conversation that people might want to have.
No, from my perspective, I thought I was actually I was glad to see a lot of the concerns are the same.
Mhm.
So I think that's a positive sign.
Yeah.
Or I take it as one anyway.
Yeah, I think overall there was tremendous agreement. There was no disagreement on anything. And I think that as we move forward, it's not going to be difficult to put all of these things together. I would recommend that we change our moniker from deal breaker.
Yeah, that's good.
To high priority or something along those lines, because at some point DOT will probably join these joint meetings. And while we'll always have an opportunity to have an executive discussion, if these are public meetings, and Laura and I and Joe are going to meet with Solinsky on Friday, and one of the elements of that meeting is a process.
That Moose or Stanley?
Joan's dog is here.
It's not Stanley and it's not Moose?
It's not
Not
Stan.
Moose, not Moose.
Okay.
I think you're right, Susan. I on occasion try to scratch my head and come up with a different term for that.
Mhm.
And in my head, it will remain a deal breaker, but I think it doesn't lend itself to very well to good conversation.
You know, it's a little confrontational.
Yeah, and I would say that using the term deal breaker was helpful to get the two separate
Sure.
committees to address what
Right.
were their high priorities or things that they felt absolutely had to be in a final agreement to raise with DOT. We can easily change that to say, highlight them as high priority. My question, Susan, would before the next joint meeting, would it be helpful to recast the combined elements with language that sounds more like a MOA and less like bullet points?
Well,
Or do you want to leave it as bullet points for now?
that's an interesting question because there were 4 or 5 items that we discussed jointly where we asked you and Joe to come up with better language to make the intent more clear. And that didn't come through in the revision. So I think that what we're looking for on those items is something with a little more specificity so we understand what it is we're trying to accomplish. So I don't have a problem with it being in bullet format but to flesh out those issues that we need a little more clarity on. How about this? I'm gonna mark up a copy and send to you, Dave.
That'd be great.
And then we can kind of go from there. Welcome, Joan.
Joan,
Joan,
you're muted.
you gotta unmute
Oh,
yourself.
yeah. I don't understand because I clicked Joe. Where's Joe? Joe, I clicked on the Zoom invitation that you sent us and it said there was another meeting in process. So thank you for sending me another one with the correct link, which is sort of, I want to discuss it with you afterwards because I'm not sure why it didn't work from your email that you sent us. That's one
It
issue.
was
Can
my
you-
my fault. Excuse me, it's my fault. I
Oh,
create 2 meetings.
oh,
So Joan decided to go to one by herself.
exactly.
Okay. Well,
I don't know if are you going over this document, the combined MOA elements?
yes, what we just talked about was an overall feeling that all of us had that we're pretty much in agreement on with the other district on what's important to us, that the revision needs more work. I'm going to take a crack at some of these things, send it to Dave, and I think that we would send it then to both you and Angus so that all of us are comfortable. And the same thing would happen, Dave, with Laura and her group. So that by the time we have our meeting on the 18th, everyone is reasonably comfortable with what's in there.
Okay, I have a couple of comments. I have a couple of questions on it. I tried reconciling our discussions from the last call we had with Matt also. And I have a couple of questions under facilities, number 5. I thought that was going to be a deal breaker. And I don't see it highlighted. Funding for the design of the renovated, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm. My notes were a little fuzzy on that one. That was the pulsing state, the bus terminal in Middletown and the pulse point in Old Saybrook.
Right.
Does anyone have any other sense that was to be a deal breaker?
I mean, that's what I had in my notes. I mean, who knows?
Joe can speak to this maybe better than I can, but my recollection in the discussion with Matt was that this was already a commitment the DOT had made. And we're simply reflecting it in the MOA, and therefore it didn't get, it wasn't some new issue, but it's something that was already there. And Joe, I think, also said that the renovated pulse point at Old Saybrook was not an immediate urgency, but it was something that needed to be programmed. It's no problem giving that the same priority as the other facility projects. But the sense was that it was a little different because it wasn't tied into the bus study, and it wasn't tied into, the sort of current programming of what has to happen to make the merger.
Okay,
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that was the discussion too, that we said it wasn't directly tied to the merger, but
okay. So is everyone comfortable with
it's
not?
part of the
Actually,
study, but not directly tied to merging.
I'm
Okay.
fine with it. I
just-
just was wondering why it was changed. I did not have that in my notes. I
Okay.
had that same comment that you just made, Dave, about the trolley, that it was part of the existing discussions underway within Matt. The other
Right,
question
yeah.
I
And
had
wait,
was
wait, Joan,
under,
Joan,
what?
1 second, please. Just let me catch up on that. Are you talking about Old Saybrook or Westbrook?
Middletown.
We're
understand the
talking passenger terminals.
passenger terminals. Okay, got it.
Yes.
Thanks. Yep, okay.
Yeah. My latest comment about the trolley, Angus, was about the trolley that was proposed by Matt for
Yeah.
downtown Middletown, but that
Yep.
we decided that was part of their current efforts anyway, similar to what Dave mentioned a minute ago.
Yeah, no, I got
Okay.
that part of it.
Okay, the other,
It confused me, that's all, so.
okay, the other question I have is that under additional capital projects, we had listed, the ETD had also listed HR legal facility site review. Did we decide not to include those because they were not part of the study and only to include capital projects that were part of the study?
No, the special studies are in section G, right above it.
Oh,
And
I'm
we-
sorry. I meant that under special studies.
And Joan,
No,
today,
no, I'm sorry. I'm wrong.
Okay. we will be going over the special studies briefly
I'm
today,
wrong.
and those will show up as an appendix in the
Right.
MOA. Okay, so I'll take a crack
Okay.
at this, send it to Dave, and let's have a goal of getting this in final form that both committees agree on by next Wednesday, which would be the 16th. Okay, next item on the agenda, staffing. This is really the heart and soul of this particular meeting, which is to address the issue of the sustainability of the staffing model that we are going to have during the transition, as well as once we merge. And to that end, Joe sent out a couple of documents for us that included existing staffing. And right now, each district has about 30 headcount, with some vacancies available or existing in Middletown. Excuse me. And then what he also sent out was a proposed organization chart that would be as of July 2021, which is this one. And so that's in essence what will carry us through the transition. And then another one for July 22, but let's stay with the one for July 21. Joe, why don't you give us a quick overview of that? I'm sure we all have a lot of questions about it.
Okay, sure. So I started with the study, kind of what the study recommends, and that's pretty much what we did here. So a few little minor changes. So you could see, kind of keep the two operations managers like we have today, one being the shoreline, one being Middletown. And I'll start at that level. We keep a director of finance. Well, make the finance manager, or we made everybody from manager except payroll. I don't know why I didn't do that director, but went to like, everybody being directors. We add on HR and payroll person. The administrative assistant becomes officially full-time, and we add on the maintenance director. So I want to start with the kind of the shared kind of departments first. So under maintenance director, we have 3 mechanics. Again, that was what was recommended in the study.
Okay.
And 1.5 service workers. Right now it's actually been 2 at each, but because of COVID, we've had to increase hours, but.
Joe, what exactly is a service worker?
So that's all well, they're different between the 2 agencies. Okay, so Middletown's more of where we'll be in the future. So in Middletown, it's the person that fuels the buses and brings them through the bus wash and cleans the interiors and then parks them all in storage.
Okay.
That checks all the other fluids as well. That's all the fluid checks. It's it's in the it's the service lane, all the service lane activities that happen every day on a bus.
Okay.
And at estuary, they just do the cleaning of the interiors because we don't have fuel. So that's right. In normal times, it's not a full-time job. Now it is because we're having to disinfect the buses every day. So we're doing it, cleaning interiors much more. But typically it's not.
Okay. On the maintenance director, you've hired that person, have you not?
Well, we've selected someone and I'm just waiting for for CONDOT to give me all the paperwork so we don't commit money without having that.
Are you anticipating that they will do that in a timely fashion?
I have a meeting tomorrow. So I should know. I think you know what, if we don't have a clear answer tomorrow, that will be a question on Friday.
Okay.
I'm
We do,
sorry, excuse me, a question for whom on Friday?
Dennis.
A question for Dennis. I'd like to just weigh in on this one point because for me, the staffing on or before July 21 is a critical component that we have the okay, the funding, and who's paying for every single one of these positions that we're asking for. And we were promised the maintenance director yesterday. And so I personally have zero tolerance for Dennis going, I'll check into it, or it's being held up, or some other crap that Dennis is going to hand out. Joe, this is like, hire the guy.
Yes, I agree. We are. I'm going to be pushing. I'm hoping tomorrow it will all be resolved.
All right. Well,
And
this
we'll
has
be
been
good for Friday.
it's been going on for months.
It has been.
And it's and then hopefully this person is still available to take the job. But the other thing I understood about this position is that one of the reasons they initially approved hiring it was that Middletown needed a maintenance director with or without the merger. And I mean they can't seem to get that.
Well, we need a joint one. So both are alone or kind of small to have a maintenance director.
Okay, all right, I misunderstood.
So the idea was no matter what happens, we could share a maintenance director to run, even if we have 2 separate maintenance departments, they could help manage the 2 maintenance departments.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
and that's fine.
you'll clue me in tomorrow with regard to what he has to say about that one. On the administrative assistant, is that our Lisa?
Yes.
And she is currently part-time?
Well, because Middletown's paying for a portion of her salary that she works there, she's full-time, but for us, she's part-time, if that makes sense. We want CONDOT to pony up the money to make her full-time.
Okay. So what you're talking about is 1 FTE administrative assistant.
Correct.
All right. I was not aware she was being paid partly by Middletown and partly by us.
Well, we bill Middletown. Remember,
Okay.
we bill directly for her hours.
Okay, that's like what we're going to do for Helena. Okay.
Right. but Connett's never provided, the money to officially make her full-time.
Okay, so
We're
we,
sharing amongst each other.
okay, we need the administrative assistant to be full-time now, correct?
Yes.
Okay. HR payroll manager. I have a question here, which is payroll is typically a finance and business function. And why does this organization need a full-time HR person?
Well, so a lot of that's going to be because once we hit 50 employees,
Yeah,
all the new requirements come in. We get to deal with FMLA, paid sick leave requirements, EEO,
right.
the ACA, all those things we're exempt from today. And you're going to have already one union that we have to work with. And then just processing all the people. This was what we looked at other similar sized agencies, and this was every one of them has an HR person because of how complicated it gets once you hit break that 50 mark.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, just a question about that, Joe. Is that why you put the payroll manager under HR to make sure, so to have the HR position full-time?
Right, and so having them also do some payroll, gives them some more duties to make sure it fills their schedule.
So without payroll, there's not sufficient work for an HR person?
I think we'll keep them pretty busy. Yeah, okay.
If I can intervene, one of the things that's really important to do between now and July of next year is to come up with uniform personnel policies and procedures. ETD has very good personnel policies. Middletown does not. And so part of this effort is the challenge to this person is to prepare for the merger by creating uniform policies and procedures for personnel administration. And Joe is absolutely right. Once you're in the plus 50 headcount, you're subject to all kinds of HR requirements that are very technical and only an HR professional should really be trying to administer.
Is there any advisability to having the HR payroll person report to the director of finance instead of directly to the executive director?
That's something that Dave and I discussed and I've thought about. So there are certainly some reason on the payroll side, yes. But for some of these things, they're going to have to be a direct report on some activities anyway, because
Mhm.
like EEO requires that. So
Right.
if there's certain things that require that in that job, they have to have a direct report to the CEO.
Right.
That doesn't mean they can't report somebody else for other activities, but
Mhm.
and then but I think honestly, a lot of who they're going to work with is going to be the operations people, because a lot of it that they're going to be doing is going to be assisting with, personnel matters
Mhm.
that fall more under operations.
Okay.
But I've kind of gone back and forth on whether that should be, and the finance, has more admin stuff or not. So
Okay.
I think
Well,
you can make a case for either one.
you may over time change your mind as you see how things operate jointly.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
But the bottom line then is we're looking at one HR payroll manager full-time, and this is a position we want when? Now?
Well, as Dave said, we really need that now, because in these first 2 years, that person's going to be very busy making bring everything together. We got to get all of our benefits the same, all,
Sure.
our
When
pay
you-
scales. There's a lot to do. For this
When you
person.
say, okay, when we say now, Joe, are we talking on March 1st when
Yeah,
the
I
MOA
think
is?
as
or-
soon as I think it's the minute it's signed, because
Okay,
it's hard to make the other stuff happen without this person.
okay.
So again, I'm beating the dead horse here on the Dennis thing, but if you
That's-
want somebody to hit the ground running March 1, at what point, Joe, do you say to Dennis, approve it, fund it, and let me advertise it?
Well, that's a question for this group, but I mean, if we put it in the MOA, then it won't happen until the MOA is signed, which is March. If we want to try and get it sooner, we can try and get it sooner, but then it would be, that's a different strategy. That's fine.
I'm confused.
It's
I'm
certainly
confused.
justifiable, but it's just a decision of ours whether we want to try and push that now or if we want to, wait till
Okay.
have it in the
explain this
MOA.
to me. Explain this to me. You need a maintenance director now. You've advertised for it. You've selected somebody, but you haven't got the money.
Right.
So you can't start that position, even though that position is here in your
It's approved.
MOA. Okay,
Yep.
it's approved. And how do you get the other positions approved, even if they're in the MOA, so that you can get going to hit the ground running?
We could do the same process we did for the maintenance director. I just don't know how, I don't know how willing they'll be for the other things. I think as they see us really working hard on this, I think they're more willing. They see we're serious and we're moving. We're not, in no way are we dragging our feet here. We are working full speed on this. So
Right, we're working full speed and
I
they've
think
still
they
done
will
nothing.
be
So-
more willing to do it. I have no problem if we want to ask for it now. I can do that.
Susan,
Well,
I don't mean to be stepping
It's
on
just
your
it's just
toes
a
here,
strategy
but-
of us. I mean, whether we want to do strategy wise, I could certainly do that. But we probably want to get through everything and see if there's any others. If we decide we want to do that, are there others we wanted to try to do that with? And we've had the discussion. There are 3 positions we know that we were saying they're really the sooner the better to make, because they're needed to make this all happen.
The way I
It's an
look at,
interesting-
go ahead.
Sorry, that's an interesting little conversation we just had. There are three positions that are necessary to make this happen. They told us, I don't know how many months ago, that the maintenance director had been authorized, and I thought they'd said hired, but maybe I just
Oh.
that was wishful thinking. I think, strategy, you talked about strategy, Joe. The strategy, it's not making any sense to me. Right now, it seems to me that we are doing everything that we can to make this happen as quickly as we can, as efficiently as we can, and more important, as happily as we can. That's not the right way to say it, but it's
Yeah,
coming
we're-
out. The DEP or DOT has done nothing that I can see, except
Yeah.
for sit back and say, boy, if you guys show us this, I'm like, my God, how many times do you have to put that bait out before you get? It's like, they keep moving that line in the sand a little bit further, a little bit further.
Well, one of the things they said, Angus, when you and Noel talked to Andreski and
Yep.
was with regard to all of these other positions, that they would not consider those until there was a signed MOA.
Yep.
How to Leslie's point, it seems to me strategically, we can say to them, we want authorization now for these XYZ positions to go out and to advertise and interview. And that does not commit them, because they haven't committed on the maintenance manager either.
Right.
So that on March 1st, Joe will have done all the legwork and we're ready to hire, but their
Yep.
commitment then has to be, okay, you've signed the MOA, you've interviewed these people.
Yeah.
good candidates, let's go.
Yeah,
Uh,
I agree with that almost 100%. I think that if we have it in place, that makes perfect sense because, you'd hate, but then you get into the situation where you've got someone lined up and you end
Right.
up waiting 3 months and they're not available anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we could try to get, I have no problem with trying to get it sooner if that's what we want to do. I have no problem with that. I can tell you what the really issue's been. It's, it's a typical, state bureaucrat issue. Doing it before the signed MOA, they are sticking their neck out a bit. Because what if we say, okay, we took your money, now we're not going to sign.
But they are giving us any money, Joe.
Right.
But this is how they see it. They're still sticking
Yeah.
their neck out. I'm just telling you,
That's-
this is how they see it. Until there's a signed agreement, they're sticking their neck out. And so it's more risky than waiting until the agreement's signed. That's how they see it.
No,
It doesn't mean that they're not going to do it. It just, there's more risk there on their end.
I'll
The,
tell you
the,
what,
the,
Anna,
the only risk is that they actually make a commitment to do something.
Yeah.
They say, yeah, we'll do it. Commitment to fund, a commitment, an authorization to go ahead, all contingent upon the signed MOA.
Yeah.
Whether it's
Yeah,
March 1,
I
March
think
10, March.
I think they'll be very much more agreeable to that. I
Yeah,
think that would be,
It's
very
fine. It's
agreeable.
all we're asking. We're asking for them to put their little feet out there and do something.
yeah, because I keep making the case to them that we need these positions. We cannot make this happen with the staffing we have today.
No,
Right.
but
Cannot-
maintenance.
We
the
cannot
maintenance director,
successfully
that's
make it
now.
happen.
Your
Yes, maintenance directors now. Yes.
Now.
Yep.
Okay, let's back up
Yep.
for a minute. The positions that we are referring to are the HR payroll position, the maintenance manager, and the grants and procurement. Are those the three we're talking about?
Yes.
What about the bookkeeper? We'll come
We already
back to,
have one. The
but
bookkeeper's already on
Yeah, but
staff. Middletown.
that person is only part-time.
Yes.
Don't we want a full-time bookkeeper?
Probably not right away because this person does not want to be full-time. So we would have to train somebody new and
Well,
Okay.
the question there, is there a need for the bookkeeper to be full-time? Or will there be a need for the bookkeeper to be built full-time?
I think we want to make sure we have the ability to do that.
But what does that mean, Joe?
I think we want the approval of Conduct to have a full-time bookkeeper. And if we keep the current part-time one for now, that's fine. But, we need approval of the funding for a full-time person.
It's a little bit of a puzzle here because the HR person and the grants and procurement person, both of those people will relieve some of Helena's workload.
Yes.
And therefore her ability to get along with a part-time bookkeeper is better. But if DOT drags its feet on these positions, which it has been doing, then we are asking Helena to do everything she does for us and everything she does for them with a part-time bookkeeper.
That's
And
right.
that's where the stress load comes in. I believe that is not a sustainable personnel plan for our finance director without these other positions.
Right. And the grants and procurement would help a lot off of
Yeah,
her.
Exactly, grants and procurement and
More
payroll.
than any. Payroll will help some, but more than anything for her, it's grants and procurement.
So for under the finance area, these three positions, the bookkeeper, the grants and the HR, they are all interrelated.
Yes.
And to have DOT pick them off one by one and say, well, you can have a bookkeeper now, but you can't have this other person, then we have an issue with a finance manager who's going to get burned out.
Yeah. So I think if the bookkeeper is not as pressing because we have the part-time one. And Helena's happy with her. She's gotten her trained up.
All right.
So I know Helena would not want to change that because we're going to have to train. I mean, once we hire these other positions on March 1, then they gotta
She's got to train them anyway.
We gotta train them anyway, that's right, and get them up to speed, and that's
Okay,
gonna be a couple months at least.
the positions we're talking about in this strategy that we've described, the first one is HR payroll. The second one is the grants procurement. And the third is the maintenance manager. Are those the three positions we're saying we need immediately?
Yes,
Okay, so those are the three that would be subject to the strategy we discussed of saying to DOT, we want your authorization to approve advertising and onboarding these people conditioned on the signing of the MOA, so that we can do the groundwork and the legwork leading up to March 1st and not have to wait 4 more months after that to advertise an interview. Is that
Correct.
where everybody is?
I think so.
Yes.
Sounds good.
Yes.
Okay. Alrighty. I think, Joe, let's roll that into the meeting agenda for Laura and you and I on Friday.
okay.
Are there any other positions that should be rolled up into that strategy?
I don't know about the strategies, but could somebody, I don't understand what, you need 2 road supervisors in Middletown and none on the shoreline. What does a road supervisor actually do?
They, so they are, I'm trying to say without saying road supervisor, but they're on the, I mean, it's really like the name sounds, they're out on the road supervising the bus operators, checking time points, checking, compliance with rules and regulations, being out there with customers, like frontline supervisors.
Okay, so.
They
so
have
but
that
the-
today. Well,
the-
they
the
have that
logic-
today.
The logic of 2 out of Middletown and 0 in Shoreline, what's the logic there?
That's what it is today. So that's not adding any to Middletown. That's keeping it as is for right now. And if you look at the next one, we add them to the shoreline. It was really just a question of when do we add them, and
Okay,
they're not really involved in. They're not part of the merging the 2 agencies. They're part of the staffing the 2 better.
Oh, I
So
see. Okay, thank
I
you.
saved them for the next round because we should have them. You should have frontline supervisors,
okay.
but they're not part of making the merger happen.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to go back to these 3 positions. I had a couple of other questions. Joe, do you have, or does the study identify a salary range for these positions?
It does not. Well,
Who
that's true. It does, baked in there, and I can get what they used. They used it to come up with those budgets, but they didn't separately spell that out.
Okay, so you would need, for our meeting on Friday, to have a dollar value associated with each of those 3 positions. I assume you already have one for the maintenance manager.
Yeah, we already have a number approved by Conduct for that.
Okay, so we need that from you.
So we don't need that. Well, they've already done that. He knows what that, that's all set. That's just them giving us the final go ahead.
For the
It's
other
the other
2.
2.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll come up. Well, they'll want to negotiate that back and forth too, but I will.
All right, so we have a range of what we're talking
Yep,
about.
I'll have that.
Okay, another question is there physical space for these people to work out of Middletown? And is that where they would be located?
Yes. There is
Okay.
space in Middletown. There's not space in Estuary, but there's
Right.
space in Middletown.
There is space in Middletown, and so there's a place to put them if we get them on board quickly.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. I'm just going through my list of questions. Joan and Angus, do you have any other questions on?
I do.
Okay.
I was looking at both org charts, July 21 and July 22. if we're going to become a merged operation, has there been any thought about merging the operations director for Matt in Middletown, and then breaking it into whatever drivers are needed for the routes? Because I looked at the routes and some of, if the point I'm trying to is, if we're merging into one organization, why are we keeping the operations for Shoreline and Middletown separate and distinct for the foreseeable future?
Because of the two buildings.
So,
That's the main reason, because the Shoreline group will operate out of a Shoreline facility, like its own division. And the Middletown will be out of the Middletown division. The other reason could be, it depends on what we negotiate in terms of the union. So if we negotiate two clear divisions, you know, they might have different work roles between the two divisions based on the union contracts. So for
We
now, oh, go ahead, Dave.
Well, we discussed this with, it came up a lot in the meeting with the Middletown committee, that preserving the separate operations finesses that takes the whole labor issue off the table.
Right.
The minute you talk about having a blending of service, so that you might have people who work in Middletown now operating Shoreline routes, you create some really difficult, challenging problems. You'll have to deal with them eventually, but for purposes of making the merger happen, this is the cleanest way of leaving it. That there's Middletown work that's done by Middletown drivers, there's Shoreline work done by Shoreline drivers. They connect in Middletown, they pass each other, they drive their buses in the same places, but they're totally separate operations. That may not be sustainable in the very long
Right.
range future, but it gets you through the merger and the foreseeable future thereafter.
But
okay, I see the
and-
point, especially in terms of the staffing with the union issues in Middletown and the,
Yeah.
so therefore, but long-term, I think we should consider something
Yep.
different in the future, because currently the way both organization charts are structured is going to be up to the executive director to make sure that the functions between both the Shoreline and the Middletown are comprehensive and have joint similar objectives in mind.
Right.
Okay.
You know, eventually that might change. The other challenge too is you still have to, especially down the Shoreline, it's going to be really just operating staff. And so in that facility, there's going to be really just one person.
Okay.
So, you know, you kind of do need a location manager of some sort. What that level is, you know, we could figure out, we could change that later, but you know, do you want just one dispatcher sitting in this building?
Mhm.
And what if they have to run out for something? Like you know, what happens?
I think that's a very rational explanation, and the 671 contract expires at the end of 2023. So we will have certainly adequate time up until then to strategize about how to handle the two different staffs and
Mhm.
how we move forward. And that's
Well,
go ahead.
There's other reasons, even if they became the same union, the other reason for keeping the divisions is for seniority purposes and for bidding. You know, we don't want people bidding across divisions, because you don't want somebody who lives in, you know, say Waterford. We have several drivers that live in that area. To all of a sudden, somebody up in Middletown has more seniority than them because of the merger, you know, and now they've dropped in seniority and they lose a run on the Shoreline and they have to work out of Middletown.
Gotcha.
Understood.
You know, so that those things will still come up too. And, you know, the union already thinks that they already mentioned to me that they think that they'll keep all their seniority, and if these drivers join, that they join with zero seniority.
That's exactly what happened in Greenfield, Massachusetts. When you merged two operations, one unionized, one non-unionized, and the union basically insisted and and it was irresistible that their seniority would continue and everyone else would join with at the bottom. So that's very, very
But
disadvantageous to the workforce you have.
But that's right.
Yeah.
But divisions prevent that from happening. So there
Exactly.
could be other reasons to preserve these divisions in the future.
Okay.
So
Those are,
that's why I think if we staff it this way, if we decide later we could be more efficient doing something different and it works, then we could do that. But
Okay.
we've given ourselves that option.
okay. I think those are good explanations and a good evaluation of why it makes sense to do that now. I do have one last question on these new positions, the three that we're talking about. Are these 100% state funded? Are they eligible for CARES funding? What are our funding options to pay for these positions?
Well, everything's eligible for CARES funding, but that is a finite amount of money. So we would rather they be through some other funding source.
Meaning
Usually
Uh-huh.
state funding. Well, that's up to the state. As long
100% state, Joe?
what that's really up to them. We don't really care if it's 100% state. If they said, okay, you know what, since your grants and procurement stuff person's going to be working on all FTA related procurement stuff and grants, we'll give you money every year in your 5307 allocation to cover them. I'm fine with that too. I don't,
Should we
because
be
that's the annual allocation. So that's okay too. That's fine with me.
should we be willing to use our CARES funding for all or part of these positions?
The problem, like I said, is that my only concern with that is we don't want to do that for more than a defined period of time, because CARES will run out. And then
Yeah.
what?
But what I'm
So
thinking,
it's fine to say, if DOT says, no, look, we don't want to hire them until July 1st. And we say, you know what, we want to use CARES money to do the first 4 months. That's fine. If we were in that kind of situation, but we don't want it open-ended.
understood, but if the use of the CARES accounts enables us to get going faster,
Right.
instead of waiting months and months and months for these folks to give us any money. That is that something we're willing to do with, as you suggest, a time frame limit on it?
Right. So that might be a good point, where we said, okay, we want to be able to interview and all that, but if the agreement says not signed on March 1st, do we want to, we could possibly use CARES Act to just go ahead and move. And
Okay.
then if CONDOT's a month later, they're a month later. What everyone here doesn't know is that we just were given another 1.6 million from CONDOT yesterday. Well, we agreed with CONDOT for another 1.6 million in CARES funding, 960,000 of which is for extra mile for 3 years. So that's another 640,000 for other purposes. And Middletown just got another 800,000. So we both have a good amount of CARES Act funds.
Okay. By the way, for those of you who don't know, Joe did a yeoman's job of negotiating with them. Told them that his board was not going to go along with something unless they gave him the extra money. And they actually gave it to him. So congratulations and thank you, Joe. But I assume with these three positions that Middletown and Estuary would share in the funding of them as well.
That will be up. That's something we could figure out. Once the MOA is signed, I don't know if it's that important which one we use, because part of that MOA is that Middletown's going to assign their grants to us anyway. So,
but that's not going to happen. The assets signed over probably won't happen until
2022,
July of 22. So
yeah,
but
it's easy to split. It's easy enough to split costs.
Okay.
It's not hard.
I just don't want there to be any surprises. So we have three positions, just to summarize, for July 1st, 22. We have three positions we want authorization for prior to March 1st that we can advertise for and interview for. Those positions will be contingent, final approval will be contingent on the signing of the MOA on March 1st. They are preferred to be funded through the state, but both districts are willing to share in the use of their existing care funds for a limited time period to get them on board. Is that correct? Is that a correct summary of where we are?
I'm not sure that's strong enough to make me happy.
All right, what else do you want?
The two things I want to see up front, like yesterday, is the authorization in writing, commitment to fund, which obviously states the amount that they will pay in writing. And yes, I'm fine with, carrying it for a few months with CARES Act money. If our timing is off, okay, fine, I can live with that. But the DOT has got to put something in writing so that we can advertise these things and go forward and hit the ground running in March.
Well, I think that any authorization would have to be in writing.
If they gave us something similar to what they gave us for maintenance, that would be, putting it in, in what they give for the maintenance one is put it in writing and they put the amount of money.
But Joe, why don't we have a maintenance person then?
Because
Hello,
they still want me to hire before we have a TOD.
Well, then
So-
get a TOD, add TOD, add the TOD into the mix of my requirements. I just can't handle the idea that they've got something to fall back on after we do all this work and they go, oh yeah, but we don't have a TOD on it. And we don't have this authorization, whatever piece of crap they're gonna throw at us, they will. I want this etched in stone. Is that possible?
Certainly possible to
David,
try.
don't laugh at me. I'm not
Right,
kidding around
Right, possible
here.
to try.
It's certainly possible to make that case. And I think that's what we should include, an authorization in writing and a commitment to pay in writing, which
And
is, that's essentially, Joe, what they gave us for the maintenance manager, correct?
right, yes. And I think we have a very strong case, and I think I've already been making the case to them, but the more we can make it, that these things are just essential to making this happen smoothly. It's
Okay.
essential to making this a success like they want it to be.
Here's what I'd like to ask you to do, Joe, is to write up a paragraph on what we've just discussed on these three positions with timing, requirements, salary, funding, source of funding. And we will use that in our discussion with Dennis on Friday, if Laura is in agreement with that. And
Okay.
we will send, once you write that up, please send it to Angus, Joan, and Leslie, and Dave, of course, so that we're all comfortable with it.
Okay.
And
Do you want?
go ahead.
Do you? I'm not sure we want to say for funding that. We usually just leave that to them.
I think
the
we
big
should
thing
do
is no local match. How else they fund it? I don't think that matters to us as long as there's no local match.
all right, I'm comfortable with that. Is everyone else?
Yes.
Okay. So Joe, if you could do that today, and then those of us who receive it today, if you have any concerns or suggestions, get back to Joe. And then Joe and I and Laura are gonna meet with him on Friday. And this may be part of an extended conversation with him, but he certainly isn't gonna be in a position to guarantee or commit to anything on Friday. But let's deal with that. Are there any other questions on July 2021? There being none. July 2022, is what we anticipate being in place for a merged district that is essentially merged, all except for some wind down technical stuff that will probably happen afterwards. I'm not, I guess the question is, Joe, is this pretty much reflective of what was recommended in the study?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. The only thing that I added was some number different, and that would be service worker. They have 2.5, but if you're really between the two agencies and 6-day operations, it just makes sense to just have a third, which you have vacations and all that stuff, sick time.
Mhm.
That third one's probably working between the two locations, but that's fine.
Okay.
And bus operator numbers are a little different just because when the study was done, we didn't have extra mile funded fully. So that's changing that number. And the dispatchers, I forget how we came up with 4.5, but again, it's the same idea that when you figure in 2 operations days a week, you really could use a 5th person for a 5th full time, again, to cover that 6th day and vacations and sick leave and all those things, plus the schedule them on the busier days to have a little more call value, call capacity.
Okay. I don't have any specific questions about the July 2022 array here. But does anybody else have any other questions about this other org chart? Knowing that, over time, as a year and a half goes by, Joe may have a difference of opinion about what he needs and how much to do. But what I'm going to suggest too is that the July 2022 chart and the July 2021 chart be included in the MOA as appendices, and that the 3 positions in July 2021 be identified somewhere on that chart as needing to be filled on or before March 31st of 2021. Does that represent where we are? Okay.
As far as I can tell, it does.
Okay. And again, once we present our list of things that we want and we don't get what we want, then we come back to everybody and say what next. Is there any other discussion on staffing from anyone?
Not for me.
Joan?
No.
Leslie?
No,
Joe?
I only tend to jump in when I have a complaint. I'm fine.
Okay, Joe or Dave?
No,
All
it's
right.
good.
No.
The idea of making the organization chart an appendix to the MOA is a great idea, and that'll simplify what the MOA has to say about staffing.
Okay, good. So moving along, we have a lot of other things, but I think we're going to go quickly. Bylaws discussion, I'm going to defer to a later time. We really don't need to do that as part of the MOA. Dave has done a comparison, and there are differences between the 2 bylaws that are not egregious or difficult to resolve. The question is, the more difficult question, which we'll have to answer at some future point, is what is not in there that we would like in there? And that's a little bit of a more difficult question, because we want to make sure we use the bylaws to protect our decision-making and our flexibility as much as possible. So we're not going to have a bylaws discussion. The last real item here for the MOA is a discussion of the special studies. Now, what we had asked Joe to do was identify all of the special studies additional to the regional bus study that were recommended in the regional bus study, and identify what they are, prioritize them, and give us a date for which they would begin, on which they would begin. And that's what is up here. All of these, correct me if I'm misspeaking, Joe, all of these are contained in the regional bus study with those dollar values. What Joe has done is, by creating a start date, he's basically prioritized what should happen when. This amounts to about $500,000 in additional studies. Joe and I talked earlier, because the Middletown group will be coming in under estuary, the contractee and the contractor would be estuary, not Middletown. And Joe would probably be the individual responsible to execute and manage these contracts. So, Joe, why don't you just quickly take us through? You don't have to spend a lot of
Yeah.
time, just to see if everybody's in agreement on priorities here.
Okay. So I put legal fees up top because obviously we're going to have those pretty much right away. And then throughout the whole process. And that really was just figuring legal fees that both organizations will have to negotiate all the various aspects involved here. So the next thing would be the human resources study. Again, I put that early because we want to start working that out pretty early. As soon as we get that HR person involved, that's why I kind of wait till May. Figure we gotta get an HR person on, and that will really kind of be their, they'll be really heading that study and working to find out, first, there'll be new policies needed to comply with all the new regulations. We'll have to analyze the existing policies and come up with recommendations on what should be the final policy. Looking at the pay scales, the benefits, getting all those things all the same. And then and I'm sure there'll be other considerations too that we that aren't covered here, but it's essentially kind of all the things we need to do to get us the same. Next will be environmental site review. That was something, again, in the study, to make sure that we're not taking on environmental issues that we don't know about. One thing the study said I didn't put here was if Conduct kind of balks at that some, a alternative would be for Conduct to just identify us and hold us harmless of any environmental issues. They kind of would anyway, because that's who we would go to pay for it if there was an issue. But that would just make it, formalize that.
Do you want to reflect that in the MOA? We haven't addressed that yet.
I think that's a Conduct question. I mean, ideally, I think indemnification is the best, because even if we do an environmental site review of phase 1, there still could be things we don't discover and come up later. I mean, it's less likely, but it's always a possibility, especially since
I'm going to add that to the MOA elements. Just
okay.
You can take it out later, but that we haven't even thought about that yet. But you're right, absolutely right. If somebody discovers that there are PCBs in the ground and in Middletown that no one knew about,
yeah,
now the new agency has to remediate, and DOT says, well, that's your problem.
That's right.
So I'm going to add that.
Good.
And
Joe,
and
I have a quick question on that. The environmental site review, you said it's the current MTD facility?
Yes. This is the 91 North Main and ADP's Avenue sites more than, I mean, it's probably all of them, but we're not so worried about the downtown site
Okay.
as much as North Main. North Main I'm not sure ADP's Avenue's history, but I do know that's an old industrial area. It's right next to the Remington Rand factory. There's several old factories over there. So who knows what's, you know,
Okay.
again,
Can I
the
jump in
reviews
for a
were
sec?
done.
Joe, or Susan?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to piggyback on what David just said about, you don't know if there's PCBs. I think indemnification is an absolute must. Never mind checking out what has gone on a property. Something could happen while we own the property and we could have liability. Even if it's coming from a neighbor's property, going through our property onto the next person's property, we need to be indemnified.
Correct. Okay, so Dave, you're going to put that in.
I will.
Put it in as many places as you think it should be. Okay, shoreline real
All right,
estate.
so this one was in there in case the Westbrook site doesn't work out. So
Right.
if everything works out in the Westbrook site and we go forward and we buy that, there's no need for this study. But
Okay,
it's a placeholder in case that does not happen. If it does not happen, if we start to get a sense that Westbrook's not going to work out, yeah, that timing is going to move depending on what happens there. But I put that June because ideally we'd want to know that sooner because we know that the site selection takes some time. We did one, it's a good 6-month process, so we'd want
Okay.
that to happen. Yeah,
All right.
that's again, that one's a little more flexible in the timing. Same with these other studies. I put them as July because I think that we'll have some good idea by July of other studies we might feel are necessary.
Mhm.
But that's exactly what that is. It's other studies that we identify as we move along this process. We figured there'll be something or some things that come up that we say, we didn't contemplate that initially. We really need to study this further.
Okay, good. Fair study.
Fair study. That one was mentioned in the study, but a little differently. It kind of talks about fair study to get our fair structure the same. That I'm not worried about. I don't think we'll have any problem reconciling our fair structure. It's pretty simple. The differences are very small. What's harder is a fair technology piece and making sure that we can actually accept each other's fares, and then not only accept each other's fares, but accept, this new agency is going to connect to 4 different CT transit locations, 2 CT rail locations, well, more than 2 CT rail lines, many locations, and then, other transit districts as well. So we want to make sure there's interoperability, and that's going to be complicated. So
Okay, good.
it's more studying how do we actually do the collection in a way that works for our customers across the different agencies.
Okay. Joint audit.
This was something that John Forbes wanted. He wanted us to do a joint audit statement once the audits were complete of the 2 agencies. We don't know if that's really necessary anymore, but we wanted to keep that in as another placeholder just for, because I don't, there might be another study that comes up or something we want to look at further.
Okay.
And then the final piece was a PR marketing, and that's actually in 2 places because there was in the study, they kind of separate out that there's a study piece of it, kind of, developing the new branding, if whatever it may be, and then coming up with a whole marketing plan and how we're going to let people know about this new agency.
Mhm.
And then there's also a capital piece. So that's separate. That's in the capital item. So this is just the study side of it.
Okay.
Hire a consultant and a marketing firm basically to do that piece for us.
Joe, would all of these studies have to be sent out for an RFP, or would some of them sole source?
Depends on the funding source, but most likely they would all have to be.
Wouldn't this all be 100% state money?
Yeah, and states actually, their rule is even lower than federal money. Federal's got a higher threshold. So
For-
that,
For sole source?
yeah,
Okay. Another question is,
except legal fees, of course. I mean, legal fees, we'd be using our attorneys. That we would not be expected to go out to bid for different attorneys.
this is an enormous amount of work, all these studies.
Yeah.
And
Why I
Is
need
it-
a grants and procurement person sooner
And
than
that's-
later.
well, the question to you is, do you personally have the bandwidth to do all of these?
As long as we get these staff on, that's why getting the staff is so important, because I'm figuring that the bulk of my time is going to be spent on merger issues for a while. And it's why we really need these staff positions in place. Yeah.
Yeah.
I am
Okay.
not going to have the time to do much day-to-day stuff for a while, because
Yep.
you see what this looks like.
Exactly.
And that doesn't include all of our committees' work and the actually implementing things that the studies come up with.
Right. And other things that come along. Okay.
And all
With-
those have, like you said, all those have to be bid out. So this is the reason why I need that, not just grants, but procurement early. And then, we have that other list of capital items that need to be procured to make us work. So there's
Right.
going to be a lot of procurement happening too, plus our regular procurement.
Okay. Any comments or questions or suggestions on the special studies section? Are we in agreement with these items?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm in agreement with the items. The very first thing that you said, I just would like some clarification. So ETD is gonna manage and be financially responsible for all of these things? Why is that?
ETD would be the contractee,
Okay,
and Joe felt that made more sense because Middletown was coming in under us. And Joe's
Okay.
managing it is I think, Angus, he's joint executive director of both divisions.
Yep.
He may delegate pieces of it, certainly if we get a grants and procurement, but this, in order to simplify it, so we don't have two different people contracting with the same vendor. But what I hear you're coming at it from is liability.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think that's a good cautionary tale, and we'll need to have a little more discussion on the mechanics of how this is all going to work.
Mhm.
And to have also written authorization and commitment to fund these studies before anything is put out.
Oh, yeah,
and-
yeah.
And signed. I would also recommend, Dave, that the list of these additional studies become an appendix item in the MOA.
Yep,
Yep.
I'm already in it. That makes great sense, because right now the MOA simply said that the executive director would come up with a list. So
Okay.
he has done that, and we will now incorporate that.
Okay,
And the other thing I'll just say, we've done studies before with their money, and there's a process that we go, we get a budget first that we agree to with them. We go out to bid. We do the contract within that budget. If we can't, we ask for more money. So we know how to do it so that we stay within our funding.
okay.
We've certainly
the-
done it before.
I think that Angus's point is so well taken, which is we need to do whatever we need to do to protect ourselves, so we aren't left holding the bag in the event that DOT does not meet its commitment. Okay, the next item is just an open-ended one. I think most of you know that Joe, Laura, Francis, and I are meeting with Dennis Solinsky on Friday. And she and Joe and I will have another pre-meeting briefing, but I wanted to solicit from all of you any ideas or particular items you would like to make sure we bring up. We will obviously fill them in on the process that we're using, our meeting schedules, etc. I think we will be inviting them to attend the public portion of our joint meetings. And, bring them into the process, find out what items they want in the MOA, make a very strong presentation to them about these 3 additional staff coming on board as quickly as possible. But anything else you would like to make sure that Laura and Joe and I bring up with them, and this will not be our only meeting with them, of course, but it's sort of the kickoff meeting.
Susan,
Go ahead.
I believe, unless I misunderstood you, I believe you mentioned to me that the MOA for the DOT would be signed by Dennis.
That's what Joe thinks.
I do have a problem with that. I really do think that, and I was told initially that even the Attorney General has to go over it because it has to be signed by the commissioner. And you get somebody at the bottom signing, and something is critically important as this district merger. And then the guy at the bottom picks up and leaves. What have we got?
Mhm.
So I don't know if you address that with Dennis or what
I
you
don't,
do.
we don't know who will sign it yet, but I just know who signed. I know who was authorized to sign the Yukon WRTD one.
And who was that?
That was Dennis.
I don't know that had as many millions of dollars on the line as this does, did it?
More. Yeah.
Yukon had more?
Yeah. Yeah, they're a lot. That's a big budget.
Oh.
2.7 million in operating funds every year and millions more in capital.
I mean, this is a guy that can't even sign to get us anything. Not even $55,000.
Whoever
And
signs
yet-
from Conduct, though, will have already been authorized by most likely the Attorney General's office and above. I mean,
in writing that we can see.
How about
I
we
would
do,
like to see something from the commissioner's office putting us together at the end of the day.
okay, here's what I recommend, that we bring up the issue on Friday of who from DOT will be tasked with signing this. Let's take that information back, talk among ourselves and see if any follow through needs to take place. What I'd like I'd like this meeting on Friday to be as positive as possible.
Don't invite me.
Well, you're not invited.
For good reason.
They know we don't trust them, and I don't think we need to poke them in the eye with it, but let's bring up the issue of who will sign and whether they think it will require Attorney General signature.
The reason to worry about the AG having to sign off is that can create an incredibly long delay in getting the thing done. If the commissioner tells Andreski and Andreski tells Solinsky, sign the damn thing, then you're in much better shape. But don't be surprised if they say, well, we really ought to have the AG's office sign off on this. And if they do, then you've built in potentially a lot of delay that you cannot control.
Why don't, for the purposes of Friday's meeting, we just ask the question, what is your plan for who is going to sign it and what kind of a review, if any, will be required? Because we will be presenting them with our time frame, which is that on March 1st, our aim and goal is to have a 3-party signed MOA. They don't know about our February 1st goal between the 2 districts, which I think we probably won't even need because we're in such agreement with each other anyway. So our only real time frame for them is on March 1st, and the extent to which they have staff who understand where we're going and how we got there during the rest of this process is going to be very helpful. So I think we need to invite them to attend the public section of these meetings and still preserve for ourselves an executive session to discuss negotiations that are more sensitive. Are there other things besides Leslie's issue of who is the signatory that you want to be sure we mention, ask about, bring up?
Not for me. I think that's a pretty good conversation you already scheduled, you've already got on your agenda. And
I agree.
there's going to be other meetings.
Yeah, there are. Joan, you're all set?
I'm all set.
All right. Okay, I don't think we need an executive session for now. One last question is, we do not currently have another meeting scheduled of our estuary group, this group. The next meeting that we do have scheduled is a joint meeting on December 18th. My anticipation of what we will cover at that meeting will be agreement on the revised MOA elements outline, agreement with Middletown on staffing. And Joe, to that end, it would be probably helpful if you met with the Middletown people prior to the 18th to make sure they're on board with our staffing plan. And that we would also consider the merger implementation plan that Joe is working on. Do you folks feel we should schedule another meeting for just our estuary group at this time?
I don't think it's a bad idea. We'll have things to talk about.
We will. Okay. How about, do we want to do that the week of the 14th? And one of the things that we'll discuss is feedback from the DOT.
Right.
Among other things, you want to schedule an hour sometime, maybe on the 17th. In which case, if there are issues that we feel need to be presented to the board at its meeting on the morning of the 18th, we will be in a position to identify those. We
Yes,
can
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay,
I
we
think
can
so.
always schedule this meeting. So I'm pretty flexible. You guys who still work. Is December Thursday, the 17th? Is there a specific time that's better for anybody?
1 o'clock is better for me. Either 1 o'clock or 9 o'clock.
Okay, Joe, you're the other.
1 o'clock's good.
Okay, let's do a 1 o'clock on Thursday, December 17th for just the estuary. And, we'll talk ahead of time, and if it doesn't seem like there's enough to discuss, we'll cancel, but it's probably not a bad idea to have a little bit of a wrap up before we go into the full board meeting.
I agree.
Okay, I believe that is everything for today. Are there any other comments, questions, or suggestions anyone would like to bring forward?
just a question in terms of inviting DOT to the negotiating team, public sessions. When do you anticipate that starting? Would it start while we're still discussing the elements to put into the MOA, or after that, after we agree on that?
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. We're meeting with them on December 11th.
Right.
One of the things they will ask is, what's your process? When are you meeting? Our next scheduled joint meeting is December 18th. I would think that since there isn't any real disagreement between the two districts, that bringing them in on December 18th to take a look at what's going to be in the MOA is better than keeping them in the dark and just springing it on them. But it's a very good question. So let's see what other people have to say about that. Because Dennis will assign somebody to attend these meetings. They won't be decision makers, but they will bring information back to him. And one of the things they would bring back to him is, here's a list of what they want. This is what they want to put in the MOA.
I'm wondering, I'm of two minds about having them at that meeting or the meeting after that.
Okay,
I'm just wondering if it might be better for us, MAT and ETD, to finalize the elements first, to make sure there are no disagreements. Although I don't foresee any, but you never know. Just a thought as to postponing them, not this meeting, but maybe the next meeting. I don't know. I could see both sides.
Well-
Angus, what do you think?
I'm of the same mind. I don't see any disagreements coming. I think we're pretty much on the same page at this point, maybe when we get down to the nitty gritty, but,
well,
I
one thing to keep in mind is that these meetings are public meetings.
Yeah.
And so,
The fire alarm system is being tested and the alarm will be going off.
okay. Joe, do you have an opinion about this?
I mean, so
sorry
I
about
know it's,
that.
I know it's probably gonna be Maureen Lawrence, unless something's changed. That was the plan that I heard from Dennis. So I don't, it's not like it's gonna be Dennis there and it would be Maureen. So I think it'd be fine to have her. And
Okay.
by the time the holidays and everything, I mean, there's not a lot of time until we're hoping to have something prepared. So yeah, it gives them some time to know what's in there. And
Well, a la Joan's question though, how do people
I
feel?
I don't have a strong,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Angus.
okay, I'll be right on.
Okay,
I'm sorry, I don't have a strong opinion on this one way or the other.
okay,
And I do have a 1 o'clock that just showed up, so.
gotcha. Okay. Well, let's find out, Joe, how Laura Francis feels about this.
okay,
I mean, we don't have to tell them we have a meeting on the 18th.
if we
and-
don't invite them, they're not gonna come.
Okay.
May I,
Even
humble
even though it's
suggestion is,
public.
humble suggestion is that you wait until after your meeting on the 11th and then decide whether you want them invited to the meeting on the 18th.
Actually, that's,
Good
You've got
idea.
plenty of
That's a good
time
thought, yeah.
after that to get Maureen Lawrence invited.
okay.
Yep.
Good suggestion. Thank you. Okay, thank you all. Couple of next steps. Joe is going to send something out today on the staffing issue and the strategy that we discussed. I'm going to send something to Dave on the MOA elements. We'll do a little more work on that, send it out to everybody. And I think that's it for now until Joe and Laura and I meet on Friday with DOT. Okay.
Good luck.
A motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
everybody.
everybody.
So moved.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.